I'm John Armstrong. The title of the album is Afrobeat Brasil. Yeah, I started sort of DJing soul and reggae and stuff like that in the late 70s at a place called the Country Club in Haverstock Hill. And then I DJ'd at the old Beetroot, playing R&B, jump jive, a little bit of rock and roll, rockabilly, things like that. And then the chance came up with a club called the Bass Clef on Hoxton Square, which opened in 1984. And I finished up, partly really by accident as much as by design, DJing Fridays and Saturday nights there, which is Latin music on Friday and African on Saturday. And I did that for 10 years weekly. So that was great. That was where I really developed a love for all things kind of African and Latin and Caribbean and so on. I did my first albums would have been 89, 90, something like that. And I've been lucky enough to be able to have been offered lots of stuff. And it's all been great stuff. And I've done everything. I've done African, Latin, Brazilian, Cuban, even some rock and roll and R&B and stuff like that. I've done flamenco, I've done zouk, French Caribbean music, I've done soca. It's been a great journey. I can remember one particular week, this would have been the early 80s in Paris. I was staying with a very good friend of mine, an American friend, who was writing a thesis on African music. And we were going out to clubs. And we went to this one place called the Chapelle des Lombards, which is still going now. This is about 1982. And there was a DJ, an African DJ there, who was mixing African music with Latin music, with zouk, French Caribbean music, and compas, Haitian music, beautifully seamlessly. And it was a wake-up call for me. I thought, yeah, this is beautiful and exciting, and it's different, and I really want to get into this. And I think that summer in 1982 in Paris was my sort of click point for all this. Yeah, the Brazilian Afrobeat sound. It's been around on and off for a bit, for many years in Brazil, because Brazil has a lot of very, very highly trained musicians, and although Brazil has its problems that we're always hearing about politically and economically and so forth, what it does have is a very, 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 very sophisticated musical education system. There's lots of people in Brazil, and this is historical, lots of people who play at least one or two instruments very, very well. So there's always a pool of young musicians who are looking for something to do. Now, when things like bossa nova came along, it was the instrumentation was very, very muted. It was maybe a guitar, a piano, something like that. So you had all these incredible horn players who were sort of scuffling around for work. So they were, I suppose, I mean, this is just my guess. Whenever musicians like that hear a form of international music that they can add to, that they can adapt to, or they can play, their ears prick up. And I think that's what's happened in the last sort of 20 years in Brazil. The compilation that I've done here is really just there's lots more. It's the tip of the iceberg, but it's I think it's a reasonably good bird's eye view of what's happening among Brazilians. Certainly Brazilians in the city, Brazilian musicians in the cities at the moment. Yeah, I've always had a love of Afrobeat, as well as a love of Brazilian music. And when I heard Brazilians playing Afrobeat, I thought, this is something that somebody needs to join up the dots to, and sort of present to the world as something special, rather than just another version of samba or bossa nova or something. This is something really new, And a lot of the early Brazilian Afrobeat was, let's face it, kind of pretty much a copy of Fela Kuti's band, but it doesn't take Brazilian musicians long to exercise their very, very ample imaginations and talent to start making something different. And this, I hope, is on these tracks. I've showcased some of those different things. I mean, there are elements of Senegalese, Mali and Guinean music going on in there, Ethiopian music with Tiago França, the incredible tenor player with Mata Mata. The first track, Origine, is written by a guy who used to be in Brazilian pop bands in the 90s, and then he travelled around the world just basically recording anything that he liked the sound of. And what I really like about that track is it's not only Afrobeat, there's also bits of Middle Eastern music, there's bits of Irish, almost like chieftains kind of Irish stuff going on. So very, very interesting music. So that's why I wanted to put that one on first, because it kind of showcased the sound so beautifully. Like Tassia Hayes, that was the singer on there. Now she's not what you would classically call Afrobeat, but she's very, very African in her approach to her music. And I probably wouldn't have discovered her if it weren't for a friend of mine saying you should listen to this singer. Another example of that is the group TEM, who are from Porto Alegre. My partner is Brazilian, and so my nephew, who is down there and he's also into music and plays in a band, said there's this really good band in Porto Alegre who are doing Afrobeat. You should listen to them. So there were little bits and pieces came together, and eventually I had enough for this compilation. It was really exciting. What's coming next for me with BBE? The label seems to be very interested in Brazilian music, so we're going to the other extreme next, and we're hopefully going to be doing a compilation of very, very old forró and carimbó from the northeast of Brazil, from the 50s and the 60s. And this is kind of a lot of Brazilians call this kind of music brega, which means cheesy, but actually the really old stuff has got that kind of visceral thump that the old blues has got. It's very, very strong bluesy music, featuring often the accordion, and featuring a lot of African ways of singing, like the coco and the embolada, different ways of a bit like storytelling, some of the storytelling music from West Africa. So although it's white music in the sense that there aren't many African Brazilians in it still borrows a lot from African music, so that's going to be the next thing, and looking forward to doing that. The album is called John Armstrong Presents Afrobeat Brasil. It comes out everywhere on vinyl and CD on the 30th of June.